it's just a little chit chat and a little bit of tea. What I wanted to talk about, and I'm not here to fearmonger or anything like that. I wanted to talk about where we are in our world right now and some of the things that I see, some of the things I listen to, some of the things I read. There is a lot going on. And, some has to do with our food supply. Some has to do with our healthcare supply. Some has to do with our leaders. And then we're talking about workers. There's not enough workers. And what I saw that came out of the pandemic, okay? We have a world of fear, anger. We have a world that's full of pain. And what I'm seeing is that we can't get better until we choose to get better. And we need to develop relationships that inspire and uplift one another. And so part of the reason I don't go many places is because I really haven't found places I want to go. Plus, I'm at home most of the time, and I'm trying to make my home comfortable. It's a safe haven for me for what I enjoy doing. Do I like getting out? Absolutely. So when we do, it's an awesome blessing to be away from the house. But one of the things that is very rampant in our world is we have top leaders telling us that we're not going to have food. And there's other things. We get some people that are in it that have their hand in our healthcare and our food supply, and they're putting stuff in our food. So does that worry me? No, it concerns me because there's a lot of people who can't grow their own garden or have the time to have a garden depending on their career. So that concerns me because we're not giving them options that are healthy to be able to flourish in this world and to thrive. And that brings me right down to where we are with healthcare. We're not being taught how to keep our bodies healthy. That's up to us. Eat well, exercise, but eat good food. Be really careful about those processed foods. And then it comes down to our food sources and how it's coming in. We have trucking things that are out in the news. We have different stuff. And so I see this all as a fear-mongering thing. Now, is it real? Yeah. But I think we also have to step back and say, okay, I'm a person of faith that believes in the Bible and what it teaches us, because I believe God has given us this as a tool to form our opinions, to form our direction as to where we're supposed to go. And so God desires us to prepare. But does he want us to hoard? Does he want to have us to have things that does he want us to have a Lamborghini, or does he want us to have a practical car? It doesn't matter what you have, because it's not going to heaven with you if your salvation is in Christ. But when we talk about food insecurity, which is where I'm going, what I'm hearing, which can be very scary for many people who cannot afford their groceries, and that is not to have food. The food's not coming in. And like I've shared a few times, that when I go to the grocery store, the food does not look healthy. I can't wait until I have stuff growing in my garden because the food does not look healthy. So does God want us to store up all the good stuff? No, what God wants us to do is to prepare. Now, there's people out there saying, go to Walmart and get these 10 items this week. Go to Walmart and get these 10 items, these 25, these important things. And there are so many things out there that when I listen to these people, I realize that although they might be right, or often are right, people don't have the money to go spend $200 on these items to put on a shelf. And in some places, some people don't have shelves. So it's concerning to me. Should I be worried about other people? I think first and foremost, I need to be preparing our own hearts. My husband and I need to work together towards having a relationship that glorifies God. And then we are to work together to, okay, how do we put food on our shelves? Do we need clothes? all these things that we may or may not need, we work together and we try to make sure we have on hand what our needs are. When we talk about stockpiling, which is what a lot of people are sharing, what does the scriptures say about it? Well, if you go back into Genesis, we hear about Joseph, who had the storehouses full of grain and had all that, but he was destined for that. If you remember back in scriptures, we talk about Joseph, where the scriptures share that Joseph was discarded from his family, and now his dad loved him, but his brothers hated him. And so they dropped him off, and so he ended up getting caught. He ended up in prison, and then Pharaoh decided that he needed somebody who could decipher his dreams. His dreams were very concerning because he didn't understand them. And what Joseph told him was they were going to be dealing with 7 years of, of strife, of famine, okay? And then he was talking about different other things and how the scriptures were, or how the Bible, or how he was reading into this, that he needed to prepare. So what Pharaoh did was he put Joseph in charge of the grain stores to make sure that there was going to be plenty of food for the people for 7 years after the famine started. So he had 7 years to build up this storehouse. God planned that. That's pretty cool. Now, with all that's going on, and we hear that people are talking about war, in scriptures, it talks about wars and speaking of wars and stuff. But what war are we talking about right now? And this is one thing that I've been thinking about all day. Are we in a war against people? Yeah, there's wars going on. There's guns. There's this. There's all kinds of nasty, nasty, horrible stuff, which is making people sad, stressing them out. We already went 4 years ago dealing with stuff that really affected our mental health. Everybody's, including my own. And, you know, and I still deal with some of it because it's like, this is madness. The people I trusted, I can't trust, or different stuff like that is just like, this is maddening. So every day for myself, I'm kind of like having to lean on God for encouragement to be lifted up because the world has just fallen apart. So what war are we in? I think we're in a war of mental health decline. I really do. We don't have enough people out there in this field. We also know that these people that are in that field are needing help themselves, and they take breaks and so forth. We have clinicians and nurses and stuff that need that kind of help. They're not getting enough breaks, and when they do get them, are they getting relief? We have regular workers that are dealing with stuff because of different things that are going on. So what kind of war are we in? And I'm not saying this is biblical. I'm not saying this is what God has told me. All I'm saying is the war that we are in of food deprivation, because they are manipulating our food, or the fact that they're saying we're not going to have enough food. Is this a psychological war that's messing with our hearts and messing with our brains? And a part of me says yes. Nobody else has told me. This is just as I'm listening to everybody, it's like, oh my gosh. And we're talking about some very good Christian people that are teaching us wise things of how you should prep so that you have food on your table, whether it's from the summer of growing your food and what you harvest to putting it in jars and putting it on your shelves. But it could also be the people who don't have the space or the know-how to make sure they pick up an extra can of this or that when they go to the market. My thought is, in how I try to share with people, is to be aware of what is in your food. Look at those packages and understand if you cannot pronounce anything on that package, just even one thing, and most especially if it's the first item, then maybe it's not a good idea. If it has food coloring, that is not the cause of food, because there are some fruits and stuff that can turn things purple and stuff like that and can make it pretty, but it's real food that does that. If it's not our real food that's making the food coloring, then you probably shouldn't, because they are showing studies that this is affecting our children. If it's affecting our children, it's affecting adults. So much has come out and so much that we're doing to individuals that it is painful to watch. So I'm truly, I have no idea what war we're in. Could we be in a devastating war where our earth, our country, could be under attack? Absolutely. That's been the case for years. And 9/11 was proof of that. But what happened to that community that happened there? We are all devastated with that. And then a few years pass and we forget. I haven't. I remember that day so vividly. And so here we end up with COVID, another attack on our psyche and on our health. How did this come about? There is so much controversy out there. I choose not to go down that rabbit hole. But I think we have gotten to the point where it's like, how do we prepare our hearts? God wants us to prepare. He doesn't want us to hoard material things. He doesn't want us to hoard things from other people. We are here to help one another. We educate, we guide, and we also uplift. We're missing that in our culture. Even, sorry to those I love in healthcare, it's happening there too, because you are on you are instructed on how to do things that you're instructed to do. But in scriptures it says, Matthew chapter 6, 19 through 20, Jesus warned us about when he said, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in or steal." What he's saying is, store up Christ, store up the love that we are taught to do. Jesus came to this earth to teach us how to love and how to prepare for our futures. So Christ warns about stockpiling money and possessions on earth. Does that mean he does not want us to have food on the shelves? No, because that's not a possession. That is a need. Food, shelter, and clothing are a necessity. But storing up excess of things that we don't need, it doesn't mean I shouldn't have a chicken coop to protect my chickens. It means to make sure that when you do it effectively and not, they can't have a mansion. I wouldn't give them one anyway. But it just means to be sensible with your resources. So instead, believers, so we're talking about those of faith, should make choices that store up treasures in heaven. And how do you do that? Basically, it's your behavior. It's your heart. What are you doing for one another? Your top priority can be either God, money, but it can't be both. So along with that, Jesus says believers should fight against anxiety and daily needs. Oh man, people are flipping out. The COVID hit, we were all anxious. People of all faith. Because we didn't know what was going on. I have calmed down and I've gone into some clinics and we have noticed that the masks are back. They're not forcing it on the patients, but they are required. Both hospitals in our area are requiring masks, the ones that we would go to. And I find this to be very sad because they don't require it of the patients, which is good because they would get fallout or backlash if they did that. So I find that concerning because now the psyche abuse is on our medical team because they have to wear them, but the patients don't. Do you know how conflicting that is? I think it's got to be horrible. Now, have I gone into a clinic and not worn a mask? Yes, I have. I haven't been sick. If I was sick, I would definitely wear a mask. And that was the instructions at the facility that I went in. And so nobody said anything to me, although I noticed that they were. And that concerns me because I think there's a psychological thing that happens when I, as a patient, go in and see somebody who's wearing a mask. I am conflicted by what's going on. What's the truth behind what's going on? And is the virus huge in New Hampshire? My understanding is that it is, but I don't know anybody. It's okay, so maybe my social circle isn't big enough. People who work in clinical settings are around more people than I am. So that can be a fear. But we're also talking about food. We have truckers not coming in and all that. So my thought on all of this, okay, I'm not saying what's going on. I think we have evil people in politics. I think we have evil people leading our country. God designed us to have leaders we could count on. When Joseph was putting food up in store, Pharaoh, yes, he was making money because people were buying it, because he stored it up. And in exchange, you pay for something. That's a part of, if you want something, you either barter, you trade, you pay, however the course may be of the mode of trade, then you pay for it. Now it's gotten to the point where even trade is unreasonable. And the cost to receive something, like even if I make a quilt, the cost to make a quilt could be like $1,500, but a person won't want to pay more than $500-700. They're not even taking into account the labor that goes into it. So, these are things that are happening is people put certain dollar values on things, and they get cranky. They start putting people down for careers that your skill sets that they have invested their time and their efforts and their money, and they're not worth anything. I know as a seamstress, I have been treated that way, but it's like, people are like that. But for the most part, when I was doing the alterations and mending, I was paid quite fairly. But I also knew my experience and everything else, and I did research, how do I charge for this? But if I do custom work, it's more expensive because of the costs involved. It's not for me to rip somebody off, but it's because I need to account for the material, the supplies, the electric, as well as an income for myself. And people don't seem to think that we deserve one. You'll pay your mechanic, but I know a lot of people complain about their mechanics. People complain about everything. I just wish we could be in a world of where people respected one another and cared. And so I do think that we are in a war of mental health, a war of unkindness, a world of abuse. And it's happening no matter where you are. It's happening. So I recommend take a look at yourself. Look at your faith and decide, where do you want to be? Do you want to be on the side that hurts other people? Or do you want to be on the side that helps and uplifts? Now, I realize people out there are going to say, well, Christians are supposed to be nice. They're supposed to be giving. They're supposed to do this, this, and this. Yes, but they're not supposed to be doormats. And if you want to mistreat a Christian because they're kind, they're generous, they're giving, and they would do anything, and they have a compassionate heart, please don't be upset when you see that lovely person turn into somebody you didn't expect. Because we have to have the ability to say no. If you don't hear the word no because you choose not to, then yes, we can raise our voice and say no, or we can walk away. We risk the fact that people will speak behind our back. That's not my problem. And it is because it affects our mental state. But as I'm growing, and I've been growing a lot, trying to figure out, God, how do I deal with this? Because it's very painful to know the people I love dearly, people that I have worked with, and I'm seeing what's going on. It pains me to see the pain and the trials that they are facing. So I think a lot of what we're dealing with is a mental health war. Again, I do believe that we have the potential any day, any hour, to be confronted with a war. Now, Christians who say, well, I don't have to prep because some of these things, the preppers are all saying you go buy all this stuff. I'm going to first address that. If you have no money, and I've shared this before, if you don't have money to fill up your shelves, to go and have 2 shelves and go and stock them all up, don't do it. Don't put it on a credit card. Buy a little bit at a time until you get there. And I'm going to share in a future video on some very low cost meals. I have some I used to do, and I'm like, I don't really like that, but you know something? Sometimes that's all we have. And, my husband and I have been on really, our budget can be really, really tight. We've been in really hard times. We've used food pantries. So I understand that side of it. And maybe this is why God put me through this journey that I've been on, because it allows me the ability to have compassion with those who deal with disease and illness and pain. It also allows me to have compassion and understanding for those who are hurting financially. I'm not saying we're rich, because we're far from it, but at least we can go to the grocery store and buy food this week. Not everybody can. And so I am grateful for that. I'm grateful that he has a job and he works with people that are great to work with. I don't like he has to travel so far, but I like that he has a dependable job. Could that be taken away? Any job can be taken away, but the best way to keep it is to be a good worker, be ethical. So some other things, in Proverbs 12:11, whoever works his land will have plenty of bread, which means that those of you who have gardens, or those of you who know how to make bread, anybody who knows or has a skill, you will have plenty because you know how to take care of that. But he who follows worthless pursuits lacks sense. Meaning, if you're a worker, even if you work outside the home and you are a president, a CEO, a supervisor, whatever, and you're making really good, you get great bonuses or whatever, and all you're doing is buying a new truck every year or a Lamborghini or all that, that's not going to do you well in terms of, you can't, first of all, you can't take it to heaven. But second of all, if you're in need, all of a sudden you lose that job or you lose your business, how did that prepare you for rough times? It doesn't. I'm not saying nobody should have nice things, because I think it's awesome. When I know somebody who's worked hard and they have something nice and beautiful, I am so happy for them, because this is something that might be bringing them joy. And I think that is so important, to accept that no matter where we are in life, we all are entitled to enjoy some pleasures in life. God doesn't say to live like a pauper. Is that the right way of saying that? He asks us to work our land diligently, whether it's a job, whether it's your farmland, whether it's your small little garden. He is asking you to work it. So this is why he says, whoever works his land will have plenty of bread. Your land might be your job. My land is my yard. So that's what I have, and I certainly cannot survive on my retirement money, because trust me, it is not enough to get by. And then we have Proverbs 14:23. If all toil there is profit, but mere talk tends only to poverty. What that means is, if all you do is talk and brag and all that, but you don't bring work ethics and you don't bring skill or you don't bring talent, then you mean nothing. And more so if you're in a community, whether it's at your workplace or whether in a community of people with like-minded goals, it means nothing if all you are is talk with no giving, no ability to give. So I wanted to share, because I said something about Joseph. Genesis 41, verses 53 to 57. The 7 years of plenty that occurred in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come. As Joseph had said, there was famine in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. Why? Because they stored up the grains. When all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried, and they cried to Pharaoh for bread. Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, go to Joseph. What he says to do, do. So when the famine had spread all over the land, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, all the earth came to Egypt to Joseph to buy grain, because the famine was severe all over the earth. Now, this could also be the war that is in front of us. Yes, we could have the war of people fighting and stuff, guns and stuff like that. We could have all sorts of wars going on. But then if food is becoming a scarcity, quality food, edible food, food that will nourish you and make you well and keep you well, this will be a problem. And I see it as a potential problem because we have bacteria in our water sources. It's important to have good water. So one of the things I'll share right here is make sure you have plenty of water on hand, a gallon per person per day. Now, how much should you have? If I had to have a gallon every day just for me, that's 365 gallons a year. So that's what, 730 gallons for David. I don't have room for that much here. I don't. So what you do is you take whatever water comes in and you filter it and stuff like that. Water is essential to life. Plants don't grow without water. Trees don't grow fruit without water. We need water. Now, with what's happening in our world and things that are happening in our skies and how it's affecting our produce, and the chemicals that we have put into our produce over the years, into our farmlands over the years, all those chemicals, they are in our ground now. So it's going to be very difficult to have nutritious food. But there are people who are trying to make sure that their farms don't have those toxins. So even if I grow in the ground, if my neighbors are putting pesticides and stuff into his grass, that can seep over to ours, because it doesn't just stay here and go down. So we are living in a land of people wanting to kill the bugs that are actually good for our vegetables. Do I like bugs in my fruit and vegetables? No. We had last year with the cabbage, and I had tons of cabbage moss while we were away taking care of the family estate. And when I came back after a couple weeks, couple months of just back and forth, my Brussels sprouts were gone, my kale was gone, and my cabbage was gone, and I was so heartbroken. But that, to me, I'm seeing as a reflection of what can happen in our world when we allow people to kill our spirit, to kill our hearts. So I guess what I'm saying is the war in front of us? Is it the fear of no food? Possibly. So I do recommend stocking where you can financially afford to. But is it the war of, famine and death and all this stuff? It could be. Here in the country of the United States, it's very possible. But more importantly, the more that has a fear of people, or the fear that if a worker is working and they have the fear of somebody hurting them, and the only thing I can think of is in healthcare, they have so many restrictions now for patients. We're paying for care, and yet they're afraid, or they have to take safeguards because there are patients that are coming in and shooting. There are patients that come in and do horrible things. There are patients that come in and yell. Now, sometimes we get yelled at as patients too, but there has to come a balance. And so how do we start this? We start with ourselves. We check in the mirror in the morning and say, where's my attitude at? We check in and say a prayer in the morning and ask God to guide our hearts. Again, I want to reiterate that God does not desire us to be doormats, to be abused, to be yelled at, to be physically abused, whatever the case may be. God does not require that of us. God requires us to walk like the Lord did. And with that, we don't judge other people. We don't have to agree with their choices. We don't have to agree with certain things that are going on in this world. And there's things out there that I just like, this is not of God. This is of man. This is of the evil nature that is in our world that comes from the evil spirits. And yes, I do believe there's evil spirits. Think about it. Fallen angels, they are the evil side of things. And they are there to keep that going. So if we, sorry about that, the battery died. So we as Christians, if we don't build who we are, build our strength in our faith, and stand firm in that faith, then we will suffer too. Yes, we could suffer food deprivation, we could suffer in many areas, but put your shield, your armor of God on, wear it with boldness, not with fear, but with boldness. God doesn't ask us to be afraid. He asks us to lean on Him. Now I realize there are some people that might have already turned off by now because they don't have the same faith that I do, and that's okay. But I hope that those of you who held on realize that our faith can be strong. Our faith can guide us through this journey that we are on. We're on this together. But I honestly do believe that the war that we are in, it's against the evil, and I hate to say it, it is in our government. We have some good people, but they're entrenched with this. There's only so much they can do. And I don't know all the dynamics because I don't like politics, meaning I would never go into politics. Do I speak up for things? Yes, I do. And I just see how people change. They kind of twist things around. That's evil. That is the doing of Satan. And I'm sorry if you don't like me using that word, the doing of the evil one. And I just choose to still be the person genuine in who I am. But God has called me to keep my shield stronger. Still be the loving, caring person He desires me to be, but to be very protective of that in terms of giving where He directs me to give and caring where He directs me to give. And when He says caution, I take caution. And I hope that you do as well. So this isn't a fearmonger. I want you to understand. I hope that what I'm sharing today lifts you up, gives you something to be empowered, that as a Christian, we're not supposed to fear all of this. Is it scary? Yes. Do I sometimes, I get more frustrated, and yes, I cry because I don't understand it. But I also know that today when I was reading scriptures today, and I'm like, no. And after a week worth of other people sharing some stuff on their channel, which is actually great information, I think we need to stop and put our faith in God, not in people. Folks, I hope you're having a great day, and may God bless you.